Welcome to this Jenkins User Conference 2014 in San Francisco. My name is Sacha Labouret, and I'm going to do the introduction for today. So first, damn, what a year. We had a series of Jenkins User Conference. Boston, more than 400 people. Berlin, slightly less. Herzliya in Israel, more than 400. And guess who won? San Francisco, more than 600. Woo! And that's not all. We have more than 500 people online who subscribe to this conference. So that's a total of about 2,500 people who attended this series of Jenkins User Conference. It's amazing. At this pace, I think it should take no time to beat Oracle World. Ted, we're coming. Congratulations to the community. This is very important. Every drop matters in an open source project, and I think if a project that is very successful, Jenkins is clearly one of them. So thanks to the contributors, to the committers, to anybody bringing a drop in this Jenkins ocean. We received 3 prizes. The community received 3 prizes in the last few months. The Geek Choice Award, the InfoWorld, the DotCi Award, and the SD Time 100. It's amazing for an open source project to get all of that coverage. Guess what? We have a new toy in town. We have a mobile application that you can download on your iPhone or Android. And it's going to give you all of the agenda, all of the schedule, everything you need to know. So it's really great. Schedule. So as soon as I'm going to be done with my blah blah, you're going to get a real presentation from Kohsuke Kawaguchi. That's going to be the keynote. Great stuff there. And then we're going to split in 3 tracks. At noon, we're going to have lunch. And at around 2:30, 2:25, we're going to have the sponsor exhibits and beers upstairs. So the rooms are here and further on the right for you. We also have a bonus track. So we had so many things that we decided to open an additional track. It's going to be on the harbor room on that side as well. So just so you know where we are right now in the middle box here. The big red box on the left. The other track are going to be further on your right, and the bonus track are going to be on this purple box here, the harbor room. You have restrooms as well, just at the exit here on the right. When it comes to the sponsors, they are upstairs. So you just need to take the stairs by the exit, and it's just on top of us right now. For lunch, you can grab a box just at the exit, and then you can either stay around in the foyer, that's a place just outside, and speak with the other Jenkins users. You can also meet with the experts, so the experts are going to be over there as well. And we also have some specific track during lunchtime. So if you're interested in specific topics, we're going to have 4 sponsors organized in those different rooms, a specific track, discussion track, and so on. So you can have a lunch and learn session. All of this is in the material you've received. So if you want to know exactly what are those topics and where they are, you can check in the documents you've received. This morning, in the harbor room, so that's this 4th track, bonus track room, from 11 to noon, you can go and talk to the experts. So, experts from the Jenkins community, top contributors, top committers will be there. You can talk to them. You can thank them. You can complain to them, whatever you want. And they're going to be back in the foyer over here from noon until collapse. We'll see who wins. I'd like to thank a lot the sponsors. This is a user community event, and it's great for everybody in the community to be able to come and share and learn about the project. But none of this would be possible without the sponsors. So thanks a lot to all of our sponsors. It wouldn't be possible without you. Thanks. again, just above your head. So a few minutes about CloudBees as a platinum sponsor. Very quickly, I'm not going to bore you with all of the details, but CloudBees is the enterprise Jenkins company. And so we're helping you operate Jenkins on-premise, in the cloud, or in hybrid environments. A lot of companies are working with us to operate Jenkins at scale in organizations. We're obviously working very closely with the community to make sure that the community is staying up and healthy and alive and so on. So we do a lot of community engagement. We do a lot of open source contribution and so on. And then we have Jenkins Enterprise by CloudBees, which is one of our key products, where we provide support, we provide extension, things like high availability / clustering, security, large implementation. So how do you operate efficiently very large clusters of Jenkins and so on. Operation at scale, how to minimize cost of operating Jenkins at scale. That's typically why Jenkins is coming to help you. Part of the work that CloudBees is doing in the open source community, you can see some of the plugins where the team has been working. You'll probably recognize a number of very successful plugins. Obviously, Jenkins Core as well. And last but not least, the wonderful workflow plugin. KK is going to talk about the workflow. It's amazing tech. So thank you, Kohsuke. Thank you, Ryan, Nicolas Delof, Jesse, Stephen Christou, Stephen Connolly, Tom Fennelly, Bobby Sandel, and so on. A bunch of them are going to be here today during the Ask the Expert session. So another thing that worked very well in Boston was get drunk on the code. So just to be clear, you don't need to get drunk, OK? It's up to you, really. So a lot of people are asking Stephen. So Stephen is one of our support engineer at CloudBees. And he receives lots of requests about, hey, how do I do one of those plugins? I want to have my plugin with my name on it. And so what he decided to do in Boston was to organize a session with beer so that you can relax a bit, where you learn how to implement your first plugin. And that was hugely successful. I'm not sure if it was for the plugin or for the beer, but that was hugely successful. So starting at 3:30 in the bonus room, you can get there and learn how to code with Stephen and beer. Continuous integration, newsletter. So if you are interested in getting news from the community about the project, what's going on, and so on, there is a Jenkins community newsletter. It's pushed about twice a year. So that's not going to spam you too much. So if you want to register, just go on the CloudBees website on Jenkins newsletter. You'll see it's a pretty nice newsletter. A number of Jenkins meetup groups are popping up all over the world. So you can go on Meetup, try to find one that's next to you. And if you have to take a plane to get there, it's no good news. So the best option is for you to create your own meetup in your own region and get started. So you will see a number of people with lots of things under their badge. And what you can do the same. Just write who you are, what you do, what are you working on, what plugin you're contributing to, maybe. I think it would really be fun, because then when you're in the foyer, you can see what other people are doing. And it's not like, hey, you're called John. That's great. I didn't know anybody called John. Well, no, you can say, hey, you're working on the Subversion plugins. That's cool. Let's talk. So I think it could be a good way to have a useful introduction among users. We want to do better next year, always better. So there is a survey online. Please go there, provide feedback so we can improve. And now I have the big responsibility to talk about your keynote speaker. And so I'll share some slightly personal information first. The saying, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And so it's very early on that I discovered that Kohsuke and I were not quite in the same league. Back in 2010, I reached out to Kohsuke and I told him, hey, I'd like to talk to you, about to start a new venture called CloudBees. And he said, yep, thanks. What is it about? So I'm very persistent. I'm like, I'd like to talk to you about my new venture. No reply. Damn, Kohsuke. And so I'm pissed slightly. I'm like, everybody's telling me Kohsuke is the nicest guy on earth, and he's just ignoring me. So I reach out to a colleague a friend of mine at Sun. I'm like, hey, this Kohsuke guy, what a prick. He does not reply to my email. What's going on? It's like, well, wait, he's just in front of me. Hey, Kohsuke, why don't you reply to Sasha? Never received an email from Sasha. Oh, yeah? Yeah, well, I was actually sending emails to messages at noreply@linkedin.com. So I made a great first impression to Kohsuke. It was a strong start. And from there, it really went downhill. Anything he's going to do sounds trivial, but when you see the output, it's not, right? It's going to say, well, what's your hobby, Kohsuke? Well, Lego. Oh, yeah, me too. Pretty good at Lego. And then, bam, it does the Earth. It's like that, pretty much, right? It's a huge 3D Earth in Lego. And he made software to do it. It's obviously open source, so you can go and download it and do your own at home. And you're like, well, lucky shot. It's like, you're Swiss, Sasha, right? Yeah? You know the Matterhorn. Yeah, I know the Matterhorn. Bang! Take that! So it's like that about, it's a huge Matterhorn. By the way, the person doing the project management for the Matterhorn is Kohsuke's daughter. She's going to come this afternoon. She's 9 years old. So Harpreet and Steven, colleagues from Kohsuke, if you're around, she's pissed, right? You're not doing your job. You're supposed to finish this. You need to put your own Lego block in there. Another trivial thing, he likes doing cross-stitching. Well, OK, how complicated can that be? Boom. He likes to do cross-stitching of video game, old video games characters. So that's nice as well. And so the real thing is, and by the way, the picture below, it's not ease at all, right? Kohsuke is all about optimization, and so he's doing software to figure out the algorithm to minimize the thread he's going to be using to do cross-stitching, right? So the challenge is to minimize it. The other challenge is simply to find somebody to talk about that kind of thing, Long ago, another trivial thing, I have a problem, let me fix it by creating an open source project. And now, where are we? 10 years after. It has been a decade now. Can you imagine that? We have Jews all over the world, thousands of people coming here, about 1,000 people online or physically present today, and we just went the 1,000 plugins. It's amazing. Congratulations, Kohsuke.
Yeah, so that cross-stitching is an interesting problem. Just like, I'm all for optimizations. I try to think of these mathematical properties, but the people doing this needlework are like old ladies. So when I start talking about these optimization problems, their eyes would start to roll around. And so once again, I'm failing to do that. But yes. So I just wanted to, so here I am. It's great to see you all today. First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for being here today. I know your time is very precious, and I hope you have a good day. And I also wanted to thank sponsors. This is a very costly event. These hotels that charge arms and legs for events like that. And so it's really thanks to these people for making this possible. Now, compared to this data, so in the Jenkins project, we collect this data about the usage, the basic usage from your installations. And when we look at that data, compared to the last year about this time, the number of installations of Jenkins has grown about 37% year over year. And at the same time, the number of slaves have grown like 54%. And then the jobs on those grew more than 76%. So last year, I did some calculations, and the number of slaves that we need to drive across the world is occupying like 2 or 3 data centers. So we just add one more data center to the mix, and I'm really started to worry about the global impact of the CO2 emission that these Jenkins slaves are causing. So you got to go easy on these ones. But the thing I wanted to point out is that not only the new users are also coming on board, but the existing users are sort of putting more workload on it and deepening their usage, and I find it great. There was a survey done by another company, and then they discovered that of the people who are doing continuous integration, 70% of those people are doing it on Jenkins. And the next one up was like 8% for Hudson, which means people aren't yet upgraded. And then there's like another 2 or 3% for all the other tools combined. So we became a very, we became the dominant tool in this market. And so as a result of this popularity, it's really hard nowadays to go to any events without hearing the name Jenkins mentioned a couple of times. So if you've been to Amazon re:Invent, you've heard from the Amazon guy. They talked about their service and how Jenkins should benefit using those. So this is their slide. And if you watched the Google Cloud Platform live event, you'd have seen the Jenkins show up in their demo, which is really unusual because Google normally do not talk about what they do behind the scene. They are a very secretive company in that sense. But here it is. They recognize the ecosystem, the power of the community that the Jenkins should bring to the table. So they chose to expose Jenkins, and I'm really happy to see that. And here it is. It's making the Jenkins appearance on their slide as well. If you've been to DockerCon, which the Docker is all the rage nowadays, and you'd have also seen Jenkins showing up in the keynote at the same league as the GitHub and the IBM and the AWS. So that's a pretty impressive treatment. And perhaps at the pinnacle of that achievement, there was this Silicon Valley TV show. I guess this is where it is. So I suppose many of you might have already watched it. But so this is a TV series about the comedy about the startup life in the Bay Area. So it's kind of interesting insight to how the rest of the world sees us. And in one of the episodes, this is like 3 a.m. in the morning. And everyone is working hard. I think there was like a demo or some kind of launch the next day. So they are frantically working the code base. And you see in the back side, this TV is surprisingly accurate about the details. So you see in the back, you see IntelliJ IDEA. So it's a real IDE, and they're coding on the JAX-RS application. So who in the audience cares about that? But they get those things accurate. And then so at the end of in the climax of this episode, people have finished coding, and they wait for the Jenkins to finish testing. So this progress bar actually animates, and then it will bring to the completion. The things become green, and everyone would high five, and yes, and this is great. And then they all sort of fall down, fall to sleep, and then that's the end of the episode. So that was amazing product placement. And so thanks anyone in the HPO who made this possible. I owe them really. I really owe them beer. So the Jenkins project, like Sasha mentioned, just passed the 1,000 plugins. So that's, I think, the incredible achievement. And in fact, we are still getting at about one brand new plugin every other day. So that's how active the community is working on to scratch their own collective itches. And which is great. And then so when we look at the Jenkins project, when I looked at the Jenkins project, it has this feel of this bazaar or this market in Asian countries. You have lots of small alleys, and everyone is doing something. So there's this atmosphere of buzzing people. But not everything is tidy and clean, and I give you that. But it's also, so there's this incredible activity going on, which kind of makes it difficult for anyone to see really what's going on. And then, I'm spending lots of time on Jenkins community, and even I don't get to keep track of everything. So let alone you. So what I wanted to do today is sort of pinpoint, highlight some of the interesting efforts in the community in the hope of giving you the sense of all the vibe and all the buzz that's happening in the community. And this is very much the sort of a participation project. So everyone, we are really looking to engage more people in the community. So in the hope, hopefully you find some of these things that's interesting to you, and maybe you can talk to the guys who's doing it and then take things from there. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is called the .ci from Groupon. So turns out that they are using Jenkins in pretty large scale internally. And then so they came up with this rather opinionated flavor. It's almost like a custom distribution of Jenkins on top of the base. So the reason I think this is opinionated is it's razor focused on a rather narrow use case where they have an internal GitHub enterprise, and then so they wanted to make it easy to set up the build job on these repositories. So they restrict to like one Jenkins job per one repository, and instead they get rid of the entire configuration UI. And then what the people would do is they just put the .ci.yaml file into their repository, and hence the name. And then that's sufficient to sort of trigger their Jenkins instance to recognize that, oh, here's something I need to do. And then all the instruction to do the build is described in there. And then also, apparently, their deployment is more or less completely based on Docker. So without saying anything, these things out of the box would run the build inside the Docker container, and you can tell it to push the resulting build as a container to the remote repository. And so it's really sort of custom tailored around their use case. And to top it off, they implemented this backend that stores the project and then build record into MongoDB. So they said they are using this successfully to run thousands of the projects on their instances. And then the instance would come up very rapidly, and they don't have to purge the build records. So it's an amazing set of configurations. I still need to try to reach out to them and see if they can decompose some of the parts so that we can re-extract pieces. Like this MongoDB backend is probably interesting aspects for many other people outside .ci, so we want to make these things happen. Another important effort that's going on right now is the sort of like a refresh of the user interface. So first of all and foremost, it sort of give the Jenkins the fresh new look, and then that buy-in itself is good, but also behind the scenes there's a lot of hard work going on. So for example, much of the layouting engine is sort of being changed from the table-based layout to the DAV, and that allows us to do the things like responsive design. The UI controls are now made a bit bigger and more accessible. So let me just actually switch to demo so that I can show it to you. So this is like a new version. If you haven't been upgrading, you might not have seen it, but this is what the recent version of Jenkins do. And then so you can see that if the conference, yeah, okay. So if you make the font bigger, I'll actually make the window smaller, rather. What have I done? No, I don't want to magnify. Okay. Yeah, so you see that the things would react according to the window space. The controls have a lot more curved edges, so it's not really coming across correctly in the projector, but there's a lot rounder edges. If you go see the configuration page, and for that, I guess you need to log in. So if you see the configuration page, they have a lot bigger, more accessible forms. And I think it makes things a little more easier, and then it gives them a little bit fresher look. So I think that's a great first step in making the UI. And then so this effort of the fact that someone is working in the UI is really excited the community. And then to do this in ways that doesn't break the compatibility was a major accomplishment on its own, even though you didn't probably consider that as a feature. So this effort is driven by the Tom Finley, who is here today, and Kevin Bork, who is, I think, well, I forgot where he worked, but I think he's also local. So these are the people behind this effort. And then, so I think the reaction we got on these UI improvements has been very good. So we wanted to keep on keep on working at it. So one of the key areas I think that we've identified is that a lot of things inside Jenkins would require page load to get the content updated, and we want to fix that. There is this meetup of European Jenkins developers in the event called FOSDEM in Belgium in the winter. And this was sort of like a key takeaway from that conversation. So that would be one thing to do. I think there's a lot of room to organize the configuration pages in ways that are a bit more speaks to you better, as opposed to dump everything into one massive page. So perhaps something like that would be doable. And then, this is not also beyond that. It's not strictly UI or the user experience, but we wanted to make it easier for the new users to become productive on Jenkins. And for example, it's great for Jenkins to have 1,000 plugins, but it also leaves the new users relatively clueless. They have to find out what plugins they need to get things going. So maybe we can help those people by grouping them together. Like we can ask them maybe, are you doing iOS development? And then if you say yes, maybe we can show you these 5 or 6 plugins that we should install out of the box. So those are the kind of things that are under discussion. And if this is the kind of area you're passionate about, we'd really love to engage with you. And then as a part of this exercise of making the UI move forward, we're thinking about sort of dropping the servlet 2.5 requirement that is today to move on to servlet 3.0, which also, and then we did some analysis on the usage data today, and it seems there are about I think the 3 to 5% of the user base who is running old version of Tomcat. So I think this is probably coming soon. So if you're one of those people, or if you have any problem with that, I think we need to hear soon. So that was about the UI. And then there's another whole different area of Jenkins that's being worked on, which is about the deployment tool integration. There are actually 2 aspects to it, but the one that I wanted to talk about is that the development team has been automating what we do, and then operations side of the world is going through the renaissance of basically doing things like developers do, right? They manage things in source code. They write code now, just at the end. They sort of run it to do the deployment. Things get version controlled. The deployment scripts and their Puppet manifest and configuration settings get tested and all that stuff. So we wanted to sort of combine those 2 worlds of automations. And then so this idea came up. Was born in that same FOSDEM meeting where we thought, since Jenkins knows what these builds, where these builds come from, what commit ID it came from, what test was run on, if we also get to know when the deployment happened, when that bits hit the server, that would be useful building block for us to expand the domain of automations. So we sort of started doing that with Chef and Puppet, but it's also done in ways that's extensible, just like everything else in Jenkins. So this is something we wanted to get get more people to play with it. So the general idea, the way it works, is in this environment, you have the source code repository where the code exists, and then that gets built by Jenkins. So when the binary is built by Jenkins, every time it produces a slightly different binary, right? The timestamp is different, the source code is slightly different, and then so we record that the checksum of the file. We call that a fingerprint, and then the binary usually leave Jenkins to go somewhere else. So maybe it's S3, maybe it's a repository manager like Artifactory. Maybe it's just a directory in some remote file system, and it doesn't really matter. We don't really care about that. And at some later point outside Jenkins, the Puppet or the operations guys use tools like Chef and Puppet to actually grab those files and then lay them down into the target servers. And then they also take the checksum of these files. So by just sending back this checksum information to Jenkins, we can see that, the file with this checksum was created 5 days ago from the revision 155 of this repository. So that's how we correlate all this information and make this work. So in this way, you can track where things are delivered. So that's used to trigger. That can be used to trigger other activities like smoke test and so on. And then so that would help you expand the domain of automations. And then we did it in ways that would minimize the intrusion to the sort of this configuration management script. So in case of Chef, I believe we need to add 4 lines into your Chef recipes. In case of Puppet, you don't have to change anything at all. You just need to add 2 more command line options, because it turns out that the Puppet has built-in functionality that's just right for this kind of purposes. So I'm looking for people to try it out and then tell us what kind of things we can do as the next step. And then Docker is, of course, all the rage, as I said. So there's a lot of interesting activities about Jenkins and Docker. This is perhaps the most active area that's being worked on by many people. So I already talked about the .ci, where the Docker is a large part of it. But there's also a plugin for to use Docker to run the build slaves. So the idea is like every time you do the build, you create one of container, and then you run the build inside, and at the end of it, you throw it away. So you get to have a clean, known environment. And then there's also, like, obviously, the plugin to integrate allow Jenkins to push the Docker image as a result of the build into the repository. So if you are starting to use Docker as a part of the tool chain, then these plugins would come in handy. And also, another effort is to try to make it easy to use Jenkins in Docker. So I think the couple of guys in the community has been working with the Docker community to get the Jenkins image officially sort of like recognize an official Docker image. And that means we get to install those things without prefix. So if you just run Docker with, like, say, specify the name to be Jenkins, then it will launch Jenkins, latest LTS version of Jenkins into the container and make it really easy for people to try that. So all these are quite exciting, but for me personally, the one that's sort of the most exciting effort in this year is the workflow plugin. So I think there are many of you, I think many of you probably do some kind of continuous delivery pipeline like this. We have all these individual pieces automated, like running the builds and executing tests. So now we are really worrying about how to chain them together, how to combine them in ways that sort of the whole thing would run from beginning to end more or less automatically. So it's definitely doable today, and in a way it's great that the Jenkins has all these plugins that help people assemble these pieces. But the way, when you do it in Jenkins today, the way it would look like is that every sort of blocks, like each of these functionality you see here, basically generally gets mapped to one job. So the result would look something like this, and it's not particularly easy to understand how these things are put together. And then that also makes it hard to change them and so on. So there is this feeling of like, you can build, so we have all these plugins, like thousands of them, and it just covers just about everything. So you can build anything, you can build everything, but at the same time, you kind of have to assemble these pieces. And for some people, this is great, so that it gets their creativity or the imagination flying, and I've seen a number of these amazing deployments that's tuned to the limit. But for other set of people, this is just a daunting task. I just want a car. Like, can you just put them together? I don't really care. I want something that, that out of the box today, and I don't want to worry about finding the right piece, which is the fun part, by the way. But you don't want to do that. So one of the key sort of idea behind workflow plugin is to allow you to do all these things under one job, so that you see everything in one place. You don't have to put all these different pieces together. And then so another part of this is that this being text-based. So there was a number of efforts in this space to try to simplify this orchestration of activities inside Jenkins. And then we've seen a number of those. We've talked to most of these authors, and again, some of them are here today. And then we found that the Jenkins users really seems to like this idea of writing these workflow as a text, as a program. So without reading too much into it, this is, for example, how you might write the workflow. So it's entirely text written as a DSL on top of Groovy, which is another, seems to be favorite language of choice for the Jenkins community, and certainly the favorite choice for mine. And so you describe the sort of your workflow as as a program that runs from the beginning to the end, and then invoking a shell script or checking out the source code and doing all that kind of things. So in this way, you could put them into version control. You could build abstractions. You can build function calls. You know how to define variables and so on. So all the things that you need to build some non-trivial workflow becomes a lot easier. And then since this is a brand new subsystem, it's implemented a suite of plugins, but I think the magnitude of this cannot be understated. So we are taking this opportunity to fix a lot of long-standing problems that are architecturally difficult to resolve in the other more standard job types like a freestyle. So one of those is so many of you probably have tests that run for hours, if not days. At Sun, I used to have this a whole Java EE compatibility test suite, which in full cycle is going to take 7 days to complete. Now, the problem is when you do that from Jenkins today, and then in the middle of the day, if you lose the connection to the slave, or if you had to restart Jenkins because you need to install new plugins or something like that, and then the Jenkins will basically forget about the thing that was in progress. And then so when it came back up on, you have to re-trigger the execution. So if this is taking hours or days, you can imagine that this is a major headache. And this is what's keeping many Jenkins administrators up late in the Friday night, because that was really the only time they could safely restart Jenkins instances. So in Workflow, we are solving this problem. You can lose the connectivity to the slave, or you can restart Jenkins master. And so long as the actual build processes, like a Maven process, is running on that slave box, when Jenkins comes back up, it remembers where these things have been running, and they do reconnect those, and then handle those as if no interruption has happened. I think this alone is a significant improvement over what Jenkins does today. And then this kind of work would require a bit of like a magical lower underlying pieces, which we're going to talk a lot more gory details about that later today. But what I wanted to quickly mention is that another thing this would enable is the ability to create checkpoint and restart them. So in talking to many people who are doing all this complicated workflow script, we discovered that a significant amount of time is spent on recovering from failures. So imagine like these tasks, each of these boxes represents perhaps like an hour worth of some computation, like test execution. So these workflows would start running, and the things would complete one at a time, and then gradually it makes its progress to the end, except every once in a while it fails for some random silly reasons. Maybe the password had changed and you forgot to update the configuration script, or maybe the proper tool wasn't installed, maybe the disk went out of space. There are any number of reasons these things could fail outside the fault of the source code. And when that happens, you do not want to sort of throw the old execution away and redo from the scratch, because that will waste a whole bunch of computation in the early stages. So instead, what we let you do in the workflow is you can say, all right, so I'm going to create a checkpoint here. When the execution hits this point, that's a good enough state. And then so later, when you have a failure, instead of going all the way back to the beginning, you can tell the Jenkins to restart from this particular checkpoint, and you'll be able to restart from that point, as if your program has magically appeared nowhere from this middle state. So this is one of the sort of advanced features that we are trying to put into the workflow plugin for the Jenkins Enterprise like CloudBees. But these are the workflow plugin contains all the foundations to make this kind of things possible. So in case this isn't obvious, if this effort is as successful as we think it will be, then this is going to be the plugin that sort of rule them all. We hope that you won't have to combine these pieces to get this kind of orchestration or the CD pipeline done. You can just, all you have to do is to use this workflow plugin. So this is open source. There's the repository is available. We've been producing releases fairly regularly, and it's available for install. And then it also contains a bunch of extension points. And like I said, I can't go into all the details here, but there's a dedicated session that Jesse Glick and I, so between two of us, I think we wrote the bulk of that code. So if this is something interesting to you, just don't forget to appear in that talk, and we will give you all the gory details. Okay, so moving on to the other topic here. So yet another area in the Jenkins community where lots of effort is spent on is try to improve the quality of the core and plugin, because we have this unique challenge that when lots of people develop their own plugins, and the core would have to support them, but we also need to evolve them. It makes our lives a bit harder. So for one, we started switching the LTS release cycles to the train model. So we've been doing this for some time now, but the general idea is, well, we want to pick the sort of like one good release from the past, and then we want to maintain like a bug fixes for that for at about 3 months. So every month, the new release of the new sustaining release of it would come out, which only contains proven bug fixes and security fixes and that sort of things. And then so this makes it easier for more conservative enterprises to sort of get update to these versions. And then part of the motivation for switching this to train model is that in this way, the enterprise could plan ahead for the upgrade. And also, while we are testing this LTS, we'd like to interact with the users who is going to be using it. We discover that many of the serious deployments have secondary test instances to sort of test out this new upgrade. So we'd rather coordinate these opportunities so that when they discover issues, we also get to fix those in the LTS. So since we started doing this, we were able to sort of, we started seeing a few large enterprise, their Jenkins team sort of like working with us in the community to help improve the quality. And then so if you're in the same boat, I'd really love to sort of see you in this effort. And then also, there has been another effort to get this acceptance test harness and the acceptance tests themselves developed on top of Jenkins. So the general idea here is that we wanted to test Jenkins as in the form that we deliver to you. Like we want to test the Debian packages, we want to test the Jenkins to run on FreeBSD, that sort of things, in the presence of various plugins, in the kind of realistic workflow that you'd put in with the realistic fixtures outside and that sort of things. So we had this effort was originally started by Tyler, I think like maybe 2 years ago. And he was a Ruby guy, so he did this in Ruby. And then we tried to help that a little. And then the effort kind of went stagnant for a while. And then recently, we started porting this over to Java. And then that sort of, with that and then concerted effort around it, we were able to sort of attract significant contributions to this effort. So today, I think we have more than 20 people contributed to this effort, writing various test cases and harnesses that covers 50-ish major plugins. So for example, one of the tests involves starting a real Jira, Atlassian Jira, the bug tracking system, and then test the Jira plugin by actually making it to talk to it. So these are real black box integration tests. And then that will help us sort of get the coverage that was difficult before. And then, so the way it works is, it's a black box test, and then so the test would launch Jenkins somewhere with, whatever sets of plugins that you want to test together, because that's often a critical part of it. And then we use the WebDriver to interact with Jenkins over Web UI to cause side effects, and then make sure that the interesting things have happened in the ways that we expected it to be. So in this way, we can catch a browser-specific issues or the container-specific issues, like a Tomcat behaves a bit differently from Jetty. And then sometimes these things would bite us. The operating system is also an important variable. Like we had some bugs that only show up in FreeBSD. So this kind of test mechanism would allow us to catch those. So that's our hope. And the reason I'm talking about all this, about the testing, is I think this is something that's also rather useful to you. So one of our motivation for doing this is as an user, as a serious user, you probably have this set of plugins that you care about, and then set of functionality that you want to make sure things would work before you deploy the upgrade to the rest of the organizations. So the reason we did this harness is because this would allow you to write your test on top of this harness. You could say, I want to deploy these plugins on this environment and run these things and make sure that the interesting things have happened. So I'd love to sort of see more people working on this effort, and there's a lot to be done here. So so you can make your tests, and then if you started writing the test inside the same harness as we use, then now you can make your test our test, right? We'd be happy to accept those tests and then make it a part of the release criteria as we are hoping to do. And then in that way, I think everyone benefits. You no longer have to run those tests yourself, like we get to run those. So I think this is going to be a very significant effort. And also, this is done by combining lots of independently reusable PCs. So there's like an entire part about using Docker to launch these fixtures like Jira or the Open LDAP server or mail server and whatnot. Or there's like a separate part about using Vagrant to launch Jenkins in a strange environment that's otherwise like previously like otherwise difficult to do. So there's all sorts of individual abstractions that you could pick and choose. And one of the guys in the community is picking some of the pieces and adding more pieces to create this like a scalability test harness that allows us to test Jenkins with tens or even hundreds of slaves. So that's the kind of effort that we are seeing around this effort. I think I'm very excited about that. So there's a lot to be done. I think we achieved a lot here, but there's a lot to be done here. We currently don't have enough computers in the project to be able to actually run these tests at the regular execution interval on all these interesting target platforms or all these interesting browsers. So we want to do that, but we are resource constrained there. The test stabilities have some problems, so we often have a flaky test that's making our lives difficult. This is kind of important to fix too. And then I mentioned about the scalability test, but we really want to expand it beyond just a functional test. I think a lot of times the part of the testing is you want to keep it running for a week and make sure that it's not deteriorating over time. So that's the kind of thing we want to be able to do. And I hope in turn this will translate into better quality of the software. And then speaking of the quality, so there's a closely related area of the scalability. So we've been doing this sort of exercise that's coined as X1K for 1,000th executor. The idea is like what it takes to comfortably support 1,000 executors on single masters. We figure that that's probably big enough size for any single organizations. So we've been making various progress over time, and especially as in CloudBees we work with many large deployments, it became easier for us to get insight into how these instances run. So for example, as a part of this effort, we've now switched to remoting the key communication mechanism between master and slave to use NIO. So this should help us scale a larger number of slaves better. There were some initial hiccups, but I think it's getting a lot better now. And then we want to take the same technology to the CLI, not just the remoting slaves. So that's the work to be done there. We also looked at the Maven 2 jobs. I finally had a chance to sit down and talk to one of the users where they said, I use a lot of Maven 2 job types, but the archiving artifact is just way too slow. So I was able to spend the whole afternoon in their environment because we get to see where the problem is, and then use the sort of like a TCP traffic analyzer to see how the packets are flowing around. And that was able to track us down to solve this one problem. So these improvements have been made around. Another one is speaking of JNLP slaves, we started noticing that over time it tends to drop off from the cluster. And we suspect that is because the JNLP slaves, they tend to live long time. And when they lost the connection to master, it will try to reconnect. And then when it gets reconnected, it will run for a while. And then when it lost the connection for whatever reasons, then it will try to do that again and again. So anytime you have these long-running processes, it's inevitable that over time it slowly acquires sort of like a gunk, kind of a leak inside the system. And then, so we started fixing this by basically making JNLP slaves restart automatically whenever it loses a connection. Because if the master doesn't remember anything about us, might as well use the opportunity to restart. So doing this takes a bit of a lower level system operations, but we hope that something like this would help improve the stability of JNLP slaves. And finally, about the infrastructure part. So the Jenkins project has a few servers on our own where we run this like account software, the IRC bot, the Jira Confluence, and so on. And the way we've been managing it has been somewhat hodgepodge, random efforts. So I think earlier this year, Tyler has managed to, so he's kind of like a de facto in charge of the infra, and he managed to sort of shake down the Puppet Labs people and then get some the professional services time donated by them into the project. So we sat down for a week with one of their guys, and then we sort of really built out this, what we think is a modern continuous delivery pipeline based on the Puppet and the Docker and Jenkins and so on. So I don't have time to go into how these things are put together, but I really think it's a very interesting case of how you can sort of, these are all pieces that a lot of people are interested in, but apparently as we talked to this, the consultant from the Puppet labs, we discovered that not many users know how to put these pieces together. And it's difficult for them to talk about these things because most of the people they work with is the proprietary enterprise. And so there's no publicly visible use cases that other people could look at as a reference. So whereas in this case, in Jenkins project, it's all out there. So you can see all the Puppet manifest, how we put together Vagrant with RSpec, Puppet, and so on. And then you can sort of see there's sort of like a one prescriptive way of doing this kind of stuff. And I think that would be useful. And if this is the kind of thing that excites you, Jenkins project, it consists of a lot of different people. And if this is the kind of thing that excites you, I'd love to sort of see you, hop on to this effort. We designed this system so that the individual application could be worked on by individual people without needing to have access to the systems. So it's really easy to contribute. And you get to work on the cutting edge stuff, right? And we all know that inside the larger companies, we have to struggle with the reality that the stuff that's running today that's written 5 years ago. But this is like an almost entirely blue ocean project. And then, when you work in these things in open source, this is something you can point to when you talk to the next recruiter or you're looking for the next job to land. So I think this will be a great career building opportunity. And so I wanted to say that the writing Jenkins plugin is not the only way to contribute to the project. There are sort of work cut out for just about everyone. And last random piece here. I don't remember where this conversation came up, but for one thing led to another, and the next thing I know, we had this like a 3D data model of Mr. Jenkins that you can use on your 3D printer if you have one. So data is open source. I'm kind of interested in having other people hack on this to do some interesting stuff. So you can go download this image, you can order it on the 3D printing services, and I got one for myself, and it's kind of like this tiny figure. And I loved it. Of course, I wanted to bring it here, then I kind of lost it. So now I have to order another one. But anyway, so that's sort of really more or less what I wanted to talk about. There are lots of exciting things going on inside the community, and ranging from good old code development to some kind of DevOps activity, all the way to 3D data modeling in Blender. Right? So the depth of the activity in Jenkins projects is amazing. And then this is really made possible only because of the people in the community, people like you guys. So if anything, we can build this. So we are really building something interesting here together. So I hope you'll be able to sort of join the effort. And we have plenty of people in the community today hanging around. So the reason we put these like badge tags is so that you can connect these faces to the names that you probably have seen the mailing list and elsewhere. So I hope you have a chance to do that today. And I'm certainly looking forward to talk to many of you. So with that, I wanted to wrap up my part. And so thank you very much for your time, and have a good day.